Every 2 minutes, another woman becomes a victim of sexual assault. So just think about that for a quick second. While we sit here and listen to me talk, 3 or 4 women are going to become victims. I'm here today to encourage you all to think about how a national statute in response to victim care and disciplinary action for perpetrators would be beneficial in our country on college campuses. Now you might ask, why should I care? I don't know anybody, haven't seen anybody, don't really know about it. The age group 18 to 34 experiences the highest rate of sexual assault in this country, and every single one of us falls into that category. In order to understand this problem and to curb this epidemic, we must look at the scope of the issue, the discrepancies in the laws across our country, and how it would be beneficial to have this statute in place. I'm going to go through a list of statistics. These statistics come from 3 sources: RAIN.org, which stands for Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network; Know Your 9, which is a website dedicated to Title IX. I know we all had to do a Title IX intro session thing, whatever, when you came to Clemson, so we're all pretty familiar with that. As well as Justice.org, which is the website for the Department of Justice in conjunction with the Department of Education for this country. 1 in 6. 1 in 6 women will experience sexual assault during their lifetime. Like I said earlier, 18 to 34 is the most affected age group, and that's where 54% of sexual assaults occur. The age group 16 to 19, which is freshmen in college, 4-time higher rate to be sexually assaulted than any other age group. 94% of survivors will experience some sort of PTSD. This can be seen as depression, anxiety, social anxiety disorder, situational anxiety disorder, or simply just not being able to function. 79% of people will know their attacker in general. And when you talk about this number on a college campus, that rises to 90%. I think a lot of us look at sexual assault and think, oh, that's going to be someone I don't know. I've always described it as someone jumping out of a bush and just attacking you, and that's not the case. 90% of people know who their attacker is, and that's kind of scary when you think about it. I think the scariest statistic for myself is the next one I'm about to tell you. This is 994 out of 1,000. This refers to the number of perpetrators that go free. These people, whether they're victims, report or not, 994 out of every 1,000 sexual assaults never seek any justice. Only 6 people ever serve time. On college campuses, 12% of women will report their sexual assault. That's really upsetting. Think about that. So many people that you know, you'll never know if something happened to them because they're too terrified to say anything. And it becomes even more staggering when you talk about the number of women who report when their sexual assault was surrounded by alcohol, and that number dwindles to only 2%. So when you look back at the 994, 2% of women reported, and then 994 of those people go free. That's an insane number of people that are not being held to justice. Now, according to Carrie Simon, who is a lawyer that I have had the privilege of working with, she's a lawyer for the Feinberg National Law Group based out of Washington, D.C., specializing in fraternity assault. She stated that the first 15 weeks of college are the most vulnerable for victims, and this coordinates right along with the next statistic of 50% of assaults occurring between the months of August and November. That's the first semester of college. There are a lot of reasons why victims do not report, but the 2 biggest ones are fear of retaliation and fear that the police will not do anything. A victim can report and they can go and tell someone, but they can be terrified that their perpetrator, their perpetrator's friends, are going to come after them, slut-shaming them, calling them names, telling them that they are a liar and that they are nothing. Next, fearing the police. A lot of times people are not going to come forward within the time span to have a rape kit done, and then there's no physical evidence. So you're talking about a he said, she said situation. How intimidating is that to go to a police officer and say, this happened to me, and then have your perpetrator say, they're lying. It's a terrifying situation that no one wants to be put in. So now that I've talked about the scope of the problem, we have a little bit of legislation in place, but it's nowhere near enough. According to Time magazine, in 2015, California was the first state in this country to put in place a law that is directly targeted towards colleges. It stated that any perpetrator found guilty of this crime is required a 2-year suspension. And that's great. They're suspended for 2 years. That doesn't mean that they can't come back, because they can. And it's also not enough. And in 2015, that was last year, this is the first real stance that this country has taken on something so serious that we all talk about, we all know about, and yet this is the first time that something's been happening. Time also stated that most college boards are not equipped to handle issues like this that arise. So when a victim comes forward and says, this happens to me, they do not have the proper training or resources in order to help these people get to where they need to be mentally, physically, and emotionally. The boards that operate within our school systems, they operate at a different level than the Department of Justice. There's a different criteria of evidence that has to be met. It's called a preponderance of evidence. So in a court of law, you have beyond reasonable doubt. In a school setting, you have preponderance of evidence, which means that there is a 51% chance that a person did it. And that's great that you only have to meet that preponderance of evidence. That makes it a lot easier for people to get justice. But people don't know about this. Victims, survivors, they don't know about this. According to the evaluation of predictors of PTSD symptomatology, there's a provision in every state statute that says consent cannot be given if a victim has been under the influence of alcohol or drugs. Awesome. But how many of you knew that? Next to no one. No one knows these things. It's a great start to have these in place, but it's not enough, and it's not enough to propel us into the future in order to protect women. There are grants available through the Office on Violence Against Women through the Department of Justice. Those grants can only be obtained if you apply for them, and they only help the schools that are awarded the money. So if your school is not awarded the money, you're on your own. The Department of Justice does require a few minimum standards that must be met. Once these minimum standards are met in response to Title IX cases, that's it. There's nothing left to be done, and the school gets a check. From everything I've told you, I'm sure you can understand now why it's so important that we have a unified front against sexual assault on college campuses. The benefits that would come from this would show victims that we are there for them to support them and to honor their bravery and their courage coming forward and speaking out against what has happened to them. Every school must be capable to handle these situations, and every case must be treated as the same. There is no reason for a less than adequate response. The best thing that we as college students can do is to be educated. Like I said, we're the most affected age group. And as we learned earlier, there are so many ways for you to be educated, and it's the one way to make sure that we can all curb this. So in conclusion, I hope that you all can see that by looking at the scope of this problem, the discrepancies in the laws, and the benefits that would come from having such a national statute in response to victims' care and perpetrator behavior, it would show, and you can see why I'm so passionate about this issue. There's no justification for a less than adequate response for any survivor, and we need to make sure that they know that. Know your facts. Be conscious when you vote. Know what you want to see in Washington. Know the change that you want to see, and be able to be there to help move that forward and be there when the change happens. Now, at the beginning of my speech, I skipped over why I was credible to talk to all of you today. And I'm not going to lie, it's a little intimidating now that I've seen all these faces. But on October 24th, 2015, my first semester of my freshman year, I became that 1 in 6. I became that survivor. And I can hope you can see now why I am so passionate about this issue. Every statistic that I have told you I've experienced every day of my life since that happened to me. I want to know exactly what I expect when I go to someone and ask for their help. I want to be protected. I do not want to be a tragedy anymore, and higher education needs to have the same attitude. Thank you.